Hi there, my name is Therese Timmons, and this is my PowerPoint presentation on Dorothea Margaret Lange, the American photographer. She was born in 1895 and died in 1965. I really feel like this quote sums up Lange's work as a photographer, and it says, Lange had an uncanny ability to put a subject at ease and record the essence of that subject's being in that moment in time. She especially was able to gain the cooperation of women and young children, like this young boy in the migrant worker camp. Her policy was to make sure her subjects knew her before she asked anything about them. She allowed children to play with her cameras, believing that generosity on her part would lead to generosity on theirs. The reason I think this sums up her work is because I feel like she really knew how to form relationships with people through taking pictures and even before taking pictures. And it goes with that persistent debate, exploitation versus a relationship. And I feel like Lange really took on the part of relationship with someone, which I think makes her portraits so incredible and like almost acceptable, was the fact that she could have a relationship with that person and know their story personally. This is her biographical information. She was born in 1895 in Hoboken, New Jersey. She had a very traumatizing childhood growing up when her father abandoned her when she was age 12. She also had a contracting polio when she was younger and had to walk with a limp for the rest of her life. And I think that really impacted her photography and just her life in general. And I feel like that drove her even more to travel and walk around and photograph. Dorothea worked for the Farm Security Administration. Before that, Dorothea, she graduated from Wadley High School in 1913. In the fall of 1913, she attended New York Training School of Teachers. Her first portrait assignment is the Irving Brokaw family, and it launched her career as a portrait photographer. From there, she took Clarence White's photography course at Columbia University and basically studied under this photographer for a while, and much of Clarence White's photography style, I would say, influenced a lot of Dorothea Lange's photography. Then she met a inuit photographer who doesn't have a name still, and with him she built a darkroom out of a chicken coop behind her home. This taught her how to create a darkroom and ultimately how to create photographs. From there she moved to San Francisco, which is where she opened her successful portrait studio. When the Great Depression took hold in 1918 and 14, Miss Lange left her portrait business to become a photojournalist and documentary photographer of the people suffering through the hardship, which was when she was hired by the Farm Security Association, the FSA, in 1935 by director Roy Stryker. During the Great Depression, Lange photographed unemployed men who wandered the streets, alongside the migrant farmers who suffered the most from the Depression. And most of all, she was very interested in social problems in her city and how greatly they affected her city. So she really wanted to be able to see that with her own eyes and capture that with the camera. Then she died in 1965 at age 70, and she died from her disease that she had when she was a younger girl. And her photographic career, she became a photographer for the FSA in 1935, as I was talking a little bit about in her biographical information. Something I want to add on is Lange traveled extensively her whole career as a photographer. She did not stop traveling. She traveled so much because she wanted to see the wide variety of people. She had this huge desire to see new people, new faces, and hear new stories. And then, yes, she opened a successful portrait studio with her social documentary work. While living in San Francisco in 1818, Lange and her friend one day were walking the streets of San Francisco, and Lange was randomly pickpocketed by a stranger. This unfortunate event forced Lange to find work for income. This is when she started her portrait studio business. First, she began with working in a lab retouching photos for a photographer. She enjoyed retouching the photos so much that she eventually opened her own studio for retouching and portraits. Her portrait business was so successful that she was actually known among the photographic elites of San Francisco, such as Ansel Adams and Imogen Cunningham, which was a huge deal at the time. But all of this changed once the Depression hit, and it literally diminished Lang's portrait studio business and diminished all other businesses surrounding that, and the quality of her portraits were diminished as well. And with less business, this gave Lang time to think her career as a photographer and really just rethink. She worked for the War Relocation Authority photographing Japanese Americans, and I believe this was during the time she was working for the FSA. And so yes, right here is one of her most famous photographs ever taken, and not even just by her, but it's ultimately one of the most famous photographs taken during the Great Depression, and one of the reasons why we even reflect on such a time. This is another one of her greatly famous pictures, and this one is called The White Angel Breadline, and I love Lang's vantage point on here, how she has this man leaning against, like, the lines on the railing that the man's leaning against, and with the cup in his hand, and also all the sea of hats in the picture, and the different contrasts of the dark colors and the light colors, and almost like the silver color, like this silver tone on the elderly man's hat, which really draws your eyes to the middle subject and gives you a focal point. And I love how she uses a shallow depth of field, I would say, slightly, how the background's a little bit blurry than the front. And I like this one just because of how much the man's eyes shine in the picture, how Lang was able to let enough light to enter the photograph that makes this man's eyes stand out and to shine. It's very interesting how she used the lighting in this photograph, I think. The man that's leaning against the car is actually a white man, and the men behind him are all black. And it's almost hard to tell whether or not the man leaning against the car is white, just because of how dark the tones are in the photograph. So I find it interesting that Lang decided to use the light that way, and how she was able to capture all their facial expressions. Love her vantage point and this leading line of the road in the middle, and how there's a truck coming, and also just this like these long acres of land on both sides of the road. And here's another one. This is a child, and this is probably one of my favorite portraits of children she's ever taken. Love depth of field in pictures, shallow depth of field, and she has so much shallow depth of field in this picture that it really, I think it makes you even more emotional. And the more of the children, and I love this one, how the child on the right is looking, or she's faced towards us, and then the child on the left is facing backwards, and how there's this contrast between the black on the child on the left's clothes and then the whites on the child on the left side of the screen. As that quote I said from the beginning, Dorothea, she was so generous with her camera and so generous with these pictures that she let children play with her camera, and she formed such relationships with children, with whoever she was photographing, and I think that really allowed her camera to become an instrument of love, and an instrument of reform and awareness and acknowledgement. That she was able to capture the soul of a person and not just the face of them. And at the time, a lot of people responded to the federal relief grants as not fair. And a quote, what the people said at the time was, they said, "This situation is not fair. It is not fair to have a state like West Virginia, which was the largest percent of its population on public relief of any state in the Union, to dodge this responsibility any further. In fact, the Federal Relief Administration will not continue to be a party to any such arrangement. We have more than met our responsibility and have been more than fair to the state, hoping that the state government would soon recognize the obligation which has been recognized by nearly every other state in the Union." So this is another beautiful portrait of the sick migrant children. I think this really shows not only how sad the Great Depression is, but how it affected everyone physically as well as emotionally. During the Great Depression, there were these migratory camps, and there were so many people at these migratory camps. I would say over 1 million people, because there was no other refugee at the time, that the federal government wasn't able to pay for all of them and wasn't able to take care of all these migratory, wasn't able to take care of all the people at the migratory camp. So a lot of them eventually died of starvation and just being dehydrated or being completely impoverished. And I think Lang again captures how socially devastating the Great Depression was and how much it really hit everyone. And it made so these are carrot pullers from Texas, and they said, "We come from all states, and we can't make $1 a day in this field nowadays. Working from 7 in the morning till 12 noon, we earn an average of 35 cents. Significance of Dorothy Lang and her work as a documentary photographer during the Great Depression. She was one of the most acclaimed documentary photographers of the 20th century, and I believe that statement. Just how well she was able to photograph and capture the people and what it was like to go through, and she had so much truth in her photography that allowed you to enter the scene as though you were there with those people. I wouldn't say she's a pictorialist or really a modernist, but I would say some new objectivity might have been seen in her photography, just in her vantage points and the way she kind of lines up things and puts them in their old threads. But ultimately, I think she was just capturing what she saw. Dorothy Lang had a huge impact on social reform. She brought awareness to the social problems. She brought awareness to specifically to the people who were most struggling with it, the city people and the farmers, the migratory, the migrants. She really knew how to put truth in her photography in such a way that shook society at that time. I think Lang's images of needy people invoked such intense emotions while you're viewing them. Perhaps it was one of her ways of coping with her own pain that she felt. Dorothy's feelings are written all over her photographs, which extend power and passion to the viewers. The fact that she herself was in pain from her limp she had her entire life, I think is seen in a lot of her photographs, in that there's pain in the world, and she wants to show that her pain is there as well. And when you look at Dorothea's portraits, you're not only viewing an image of someone in pain, but more profoundly, you're looking into the soul of that person and entering into their pain for yourself. Dorothy Lang had many dreams as a photographer. She dreamed to create actually a massive FSA photo diary of people, she dreamed to create a massive FSA photo diary of people, America's largest cities. she wanted to take pictures of her family because she felt like they were neglected as she traveled for the government during her time as being in the FSA. But none of these dreams or tasks were completed. Her dreams and tasks were completed. I think her mission was completed, and I think her becoming a social documentary photographer changed her life and changed her dreams as a photographer, and really shaped herself as well as shaping the viewers of her photographs.